Today's first speaker is Thomas Frey, and Thomas has built an enormous following based on his ability to develop accurate visions of the future and describe the opportunities ahead. Before launching the Da Vinci Institute, where he's the executive director, he spent 15 years at IBM as an engineer and designer, winning over 270 awards, more, by the way, than any other engineer at IBM. Thomas has a clear vision of the future of banking, and that vision is mobile. He believes our financial control centers will be in our pockets and on our wrists, and that our digital devices will render traditional form factors and even human service as we know it obsolete. As the competitive landscape changes, new roles and partnerships will emerge. Here to tell you more about the future of banking and finance, please welcome Thomas Frey.
Good morning.
Good morning, thanks.
All right, it's a great pleasure to be here with you. Now, to frame this out a little bit, I'm not just going to talk about payments. We're going to get into kind of the macro view of this topic, because the whole future of business is shifting and changing, and that will have a lot of impact on how the payments are made. So let's start off with this question. 20 years from now, will the average person in the United States be spending more money or less money on transportation? And think of this as a percentage of your overall income. Will you be spending more money or less money on transportation? How about food? How about healthcare? Insurance, education, banking, electricity, housing? Now, as you work your way through all of this, am I going to be spending more money or less money 20 years from now? There's a good scenario out there for every one of these that we will be spending less money on each of those. And that could free up extra cash for other goods or services. So every future industry starts as a micro industry. Usually it's just one or two businesses that crop up, and it starts very small. And recently I wrote a paper on 100,000 new micro industries being created over the next 2 decades. See, a lot of the emerging technology that we have today, the stuff coming out of the woodwork, it's giving us the tools for creating things. As Chris Anderson, the former managing editor of Wired magazine, says that the tools of production, when they're available to everybody, everybody becomes a producer. And that's exactly what a lot of these tools are creating. So let me give you an example here. The annual worldwide sales for shoes every year is 21 billion. Roughly 3 pairs of shoes for every person on the planet. 21 billion pairs of shoes sold every year. And the projections are that within 5 years, that 5% will be smart shoes. So that means we're going to be selling 1 billion smart shoes a year in just 5 years. Now, smart shoes means different things to different people. In January, I was at the Consumer Electronics Show, and they had a company that was making smart shoes for people that were a fall risk. So anytime they would fall over, they would send an alert to people to come and help pick them back up again. My thinking is that we're going to have the ability now to make hyper-individualized shoes for individuals for different sports, for different applications, for people that are left-handed, for people that are mountain climbers, for people that play organ, people that play lacrosse. We can have people get their feet scanned in. We can have shoes that are designed specifically for that application. And as a result, we're going to have lots of little mom-and-pop businesses selling shoes and making a lot of money. And some of these are going to be kind of odd-looking shoes. I don't recommend these for myself. And we're going to start seeing really bizarre stuff coming out of the woodwork. Now here's where I think it gets real interesting. if you go jogging at night, you can sign up for a service, and as soon as your shoes recognize that you're jogging at night, it will send out a signal, and it will request that drone that can fly overhead and light up the path in front of you and charge you $20 an hour for using that. Or you can have a shoe that recognizes when it's raining out, and it can fly the umbrella drone overhead and keep you out of the rain. I pretty much like this application here. But see, we're a very backward-looking society. We're backward-looking because it's just human nature. We've all personally experienced the past. As we look around us, we see evidence of the past all around us. All information that we come into contact with is essentially history. So the past is very knowable, and yet we're going to be spending the rest of our lives in the future. So it's almost as if we're walking backwards into the future. My job as a futurist is to help turn people around, to give them some idea of what the future might hold. So how does the future get created? Well, the future gets created in the minds of everybody around us. We all participate in creating the future. Certainly some of us have more influence than others. But people make decisions today based on their understanding of what the future holds. So I use this phrase quite a bit: the future creates the present. Now this is just the opposite of what most people think. Most people think that what we're doing today is somehow going to create the future, but from a little different perspective, it's these images of the future that we have in our head determine our actions today. So here's the key thing. If we change someone's vision of the future, we change the way they make decisions today. And that's my promise to you. Before you leave here today, I'm going to change your vision of the future, and as a result, you will walk out of here making different decisions. So if I don't do that, please hold my feet to the fire. I'll have to try harder. I get asked a lot if I have a crystal ball. And yes, I do have a crystal ball. It was sitting around at home, and my wife says one day, she says, "Why don't you just take this to the office? It's just collecting dust." So reluctantly, I put it in the car, and I was no more than about 4 or 5 minutes down the road, and I looked over and I saw that my crystal ball had actually started a fire on the seat next to me. Now this is a giant lens, and the sun's shining in Colorado. This is like Boy Scouts 101. I should have known better. But then I was able to put the fire out, and it didn't cause any serious damage. But then I had this massive revelation. And the revelation, well, obviously came from my crystal ball. The revelation was that the newspaper headlines the next day were going to say, "Futurist killed by his own crystal ball." And he didn't see it coming. So that's like the biggest insult for futurists. So that's also my disclaimer. I don't see everything. Larry Page says that the main reasons companies fail is because they miss the future. I happen to agree with that. We have a lot of companies getting blindsided by the future today. Now, the technology that I showed you with smart shoes, this is what I think of as a catalytic innovation. There's so much innovation that's coming about that's disruptive innovation. That's disrupting existing industry. Catalytic innovation is creating entire new industries. So some examples in the past, catalytic innovation, things like electricity, automobiles, airplanes, photographs, telephones, sewing machines, all of these went on to create multi-billion, multi-trillion-dollar industries. But here's the thing. All industries are a bell curve. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And yes, all industries end. Every industry we have today, 1,000 years from now, will have been replaced multiple times. And here's the other key thing, is that most of the profitable industries we have today end up being in the second half of the bell curve. They're constantly having to do more with less. Now, I made this prediction at an event in 2012 in Istanbul that by 2030, over 2 billion jobs will disappear. Now, I get quoted on this in newspapers, magazines, television stations, literally all over the world. And this was never intended to be a doom or gloom statement. It was never intended to say that we're going to have 2 billion people unemployed in the world. It was intended to be a wake-up call that we're going to have to create jobs at a faster rate than ever before. In fact, this is what I refer to as the level problem. Now, most of us have this tool in our house. We use it for hanging pictures straight. We use it for doing carpentry work. But once we download a level app, then a lot of us don't need to buy that tool. That means we don't need to have as many people making the aluminum frame, making the glass bulb, doing the assembly work, the shipping, the receiving, the retail stores that are handling that. Every time we download a mobile app, it eliminates a piece of a job. It's a very, very tiny piece of a job. But once we start downloading billions upon billions of mobile apps, we're eliminating lots of jobs. So Oxford studied this in 2013. They came in and said, they looked at 700 different occupations. They said over the next couple decades, we're going to eliminate 47% of today's jobs. Coincidentally, that works out to about 2 billion jobs. So thank you, Oxford. That was nice. But we're not automating entire jobs out of existence. We're automating tasks out of existence. On one hand, we're eliminating jobs. The other hand, we're freeing up human capital. But just because our jobs go away doesn't mean we've run out of work to do in the world. That's pretty ludicrous. Have you looked around? There's an unlimited amount of work to do in the world. As long as we have problems, we're always going to have work to do. But is there going to be an actual job to do the work? We're going to have some nasty gaps in the future, so that we're going to have to pay attention to that. But we can now think faster, know faster, and do faster than ever before in history. So where's our next generation jobs going to come from? Well, they're going to come from future industries. Now, I always focus the thinking about future industries around what I call the disruptive 8. These are 8 industries that are, over the next couple decades, are going to permeate every aspect of society and literally touch the lives of every person on planet Earth. So I'll go through these quickly and touch on these. The sensor movement, in 2013, this Dr. Janice Burzek held an event called the Trillion Sensor Summit in San Francisco. And he was looking at this idea of how long will it be before we reach the first trillion sensors in the world. So the people that attended that event, they all got together and they looked at it and they thought, you know, it looks like we're going to reach the first trillion sensors somewhere between 2022 and 2024. And then by 2036, we're going to have 100 trillion sensors in the world. Now, what this means is that the sensors themselves, these are sensors that detect light, humidity, moisture, actually millions of different things, are getting very easy to mass produce. They're getting very tiny, very ubiquitous, and very inexpensive. And so we're going to start embedding sensors in paint. We'll paint our walls with them. We'll paint the sides of bridges with them. We'll embed them in our clothing. We'll have information coming from everywhere. When you look at this little skin patch, it looks like a little Band-Aid on somebody's wrist. This is a very sophisticated piece of technology with lots of information coming and going. The first iPhone that came out in 2007 had 5 sensors in it. The average smartphone today has over 20 sensors in it. So the number of sensors in a smartphone is doubling every 4 years, roughly. So the prediction is that we'll reach the first trillion sensors by 2022, and that this is going to open the doors for lots of micro industries, sensor installers, data marketplaces, design studios, repair shops, and much more. The Internet of Things. The company Cisco recognized that the number of devices connected to the Internet somewhere between 2008 and 2009 started to exceed the number of people on Earth. 6.8 billion people, 6.8 billion devices. Now the projections are that we're going to reach roughly 25 billion things connected to the Internet by 2020, and that's rising rapidly. And so we're essentially connecting the physical world around us together so we can monitor everything that's happening in the world. We're building this digital infrastructure over everything physical in the world. In January, I went to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. They had this company that was making smart jeans. I thought, wow, this is kind of stupid. These actually are kind of cool, though, because when you're walking down the street, if you're supposed to turn right, it'll buzz on your right side. If you're supposed to turn left, it'll buzz on your left side. So everywhere you go, you have a little GPS in your pants. L'Oreal is making a smart hairbrush. This is pretty cool. When you brush your hair, the sound that the hair makes as it's passing through the bristles can tell if you have split ends or cracked hair, and it'll recommend different shampoos and conditioners for you. Smart chopsticks will tell you if your food's safe to eat. The pepper projector, this is really cool. It can look at a plate of food. It'll tell you how much you weigh before you eat it and how much you're going to weigh afterwards. The biometric coffee maker, I love this one. It's really smart. You get up in the morning, you put your hand on it, it knows exactly how much caffeine should go in your coffee. We think it should have a Jack Daniel's switch on it too, but. The IC Pooch, this is really cool. So if you have pets at home, you can remotely dispense food for your pet from the office, and then you can FaceTime them. So if you have pets at home today and you're not FaceTiming them, well then shame on you. And this is really cool. This is a VR unit for chickens. And it begs the question, if the chicken thinks it's a free-range chicken, is it? And this one's for medical students. Now, because there's an eye chart on the wall, we think it's to improve their hindsight. All right, the prediction is that 10% of the world's population will be wearing clothes connected to the internet by 2022. That's just 4 years from now. And that more than 50% of internet traffic to the homes will be from appliances and devices by 2024. And that this is going to open the door for lots of micro industries, smart building installers, smart clothing developers, healthcare monitors, proximity alert systems, and much more. All right, digital twins. Now, the whole idea of digital twins came about when I was attending an event with Siemens just, a month and a half ago or so in Chicago. See, every major piece of equipment, once you put enough sensors on it, you can then suddenly you can create a digital replica of that piece of equipment that you can monitor from 1,000 miles away or on the other side of the planet. So whether it's a ship or an airplane, a piece of equipment like a tractor or a turbine in a power plant, if something breaks down, then you can instantly diagnose what the problem is and send people out to repair it. More importantly, you can anticipate problems. You can see when something's going wrong in advance, and you can do preventative maintenance on it. Now, the next step after digital twins, though, is you can create remote robotics. So remote robotics means that you can then enter this digital model and operate the equipment without having to actually be physically there. So farmers then, who retire and are living here in Arizona, can operate their farm in Montana remotely. So farmers never really have to retire, ever. Is this where we're headed? Maybe. All right, cryptocurrencies. All of this came about during the recession, 2008. A lot of angry people coming out of the woodwork because of this. And our mystery man that created Bitcoin, which started in January 2009, is an anonymous cryptocurrency. And most currencies, national currencies, are loaned into existence. Cryptocurrencies are mined into existence, a little different way of doing things. The way I explain like a Bitcoin or Ethereum, this is like buying and selling real estate. And like the giant stone coins that they used in New Guinea called the yap. Nobody actually moved these stone coins. Nobody actually moves real estate. When a new owner takes over, you just change who owns the record of who owns that property. And that's what they did with the yap. They changed who owns the property. That's the way Bitcoin works. Bitcoin's in the cloud. You just change who owns those Bitcoins. So a lot of thinking is going into, is embracing Bitcoin, is this the same as embracing the ARPANET in the 70s and the 80s? If we assume there's going to be a global currency in the future, will it be a Bitcoin-like cryptocurrency? So when we start scaling this in our minds, if there's 21 million Bitcoin, if they're worth $1,000 each, that's a $21 billion economy. And if it goes all the way up to $1 million per coin, that's a $21 trillion economy. Is that reasonable? See, there's been over 50,000 newly minted millionaires in the last 2 years just because of Bitcoin. Even Christine Lagarde, she says that, the head of the IMF, that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies could displace central banks, conventional banking, and challenge the monopoly of national monies. But she also says that it's inevitable that cryptocurrencies will be regulated by governments. Now, as the value of a currency starts going up, then that gives rise to more and more sophisticated pieces of software that support it. And that's what's been happening. As Bitcoin increased in value, then the amount of software supporting it continues to go up and climb. But there's a downside. There is no legal system. There's no Bitcoin cops out there. Stealing Bitcoin is still the perfect crime. Nobody's actually been convicted of stealing Bitcoin. We're getting close, but that hasn't happened yet. There's no dependent constituency, so every national currency has their own group of people that they're trying to support. They have an obligation to help improve the economy of that nation or that area. So there's no overall economic responsibilities for cryptocurrencies. So in my mind, coexistence is kind of the key to the whole thing. So during this transition, though, we're going to start seeing all kinds of new infrastructure. And it raises the question of what comes after banks? What happens after that? So within 5 years, mobile devices will replace credit cards, debit cards, wallets, lenders, brokers, insurance agents, money transfer abroad, or will they? And what part of this will still be controlled by our existing banking industry? So a lot of interesting questions we don't have answers for yet. So is this how we make all our payments in the future? Make them with our watch, maybe with our jewelry, with our shoes? Will ATMs in the future dispense cash, recharge phones, cards, or something else? So with WeChat in China, WeChat Pay, you can hold up a QR code in front of an ATM machine and actually get cash out. How long till we get that in the US? There are over 30 debit cards right now that allow you to load Bitcoin into the debit card and then spend it as regular cash. So we're moving to a world of currency-agnostic debit cards. How soon will we get there? What are the limitations going to be? How easy are they going to be to use? We have this coming wave of voice commerce, where we're talking to things and we can make purchases just by talking to them. So we've seen a lot of stuff about e-commerce. Now the next wave is voice commerce. And yesterday I was told that you've seen the Google AI video on how to make appointments and how it'll do things for you. Well, here's what's actually going on in China right now. So is that where we're headed here? In the US, we happen to be very good at punishing people for bad behavior. We're very bad at incentivizing people for good behavior. There's a whole mental gap there. So the way I see the banking industry, traditional banking right now, is that we have right at 94,000 branch banks in the country. But once we can start doing virtually everything on our phone, why do we need the real estate? And so we're closing branch banks at the rate of about 1,000 a year right now, 3 a day. And I think that's going to go up to closing 5,000 to 10,000 a day starting very soon. Or per year, not per day. That would be a lot. I think over 20% are going to close by 2022. So this becomes a real transition period for the banking industry. So is Bitcoin a friend or a foe? Is it good or is it evil? Is it neutral? And who has the power to decide? My prediction is that cryptocurrencies are going to replace 25% of national currencies by 2030. It's just a better way of doing things. And this opens the door for everything from cryptocurrency banks to insurance companies, loans, mortgages, coaches, and advisors. There was just word on the first cryptocurrency bank opening just recently. So as my favorite physicist, Max Planck, likes to say, is when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. All right, we talked a little bit about flying drones a little bit ago, but every time you add a new feature to a drone, it gives you new capabilities. So what kind of capabilities do you get when you add speakers to a drone? How about microphones or infrared filters or sensors? How about when you add robotic arms to a drone? What things can you do with it then? How about if you put lasers on it or put wheels on it, then it can roll on the ground as well as fly in the air? How about if you add a tow line to a drone? Looks like fun. Every Halloween, we're going to have the prankster drones out there. So we're going to go from a world of one-off drones into fleets of drones. So every city is going to have its fleet of drones, every police department, college campuses, news organizations, sports teams, farmers, airports, shipping docks, theme parks. They're all going to have their own fleets of drones that they're managing. And this will give rise to drone command centers. What these future drone command centers look like, we can only guess at this point. But if we assume that over every major city in the country that we're going to someday have 50,000 drones flying over the city, then what is the role and responsibility of the city in managing these drones? Inevitably, the city's going to get lots of calls and lots of complaints, and so the city will have to have some role and responsibility. So what are the legal privacy barriers involved in that? who has the right to shoot a drone out of the air? But more importantly than who has the right, when do we have an obligation to shoot a drone out of the air? Let's look at this situation here. This happens to be a flamethrower drone that is burning trash off of a power line. But how do we know if it's burning trash off the power line or trying to cut through the power line itself? And who makes that decision? These are discussions nobody's having yet. Cities are going to start employing fleets of drones, and drones are going to start scanning over cities, and then we'll start making these digital twins. We'll make digital models of the city, and they're going to get better over time. And this will give rise to what I call search engines for the physical world, because the attributes that we can start searching on are going to get far more complicated. I want something that smells like this or tastes like this. I want something with this level of reflectivity, with this texture, with this harmonic vibration, with this specific gravity. We don't have to know what attributes it's searching on. We just have to know how to put the inquiry in, and it will find it. So then we will be able to put inquiries into this search engine, things like, where is that rabies-infected dog right now? Did that tornado cause damage to City Hall 10 minutes ago? What's the heaviest traffic intersection in the city today? A stalker report, how close did John Doe get to Jane Doe yesterday? And infrastructure reports, what's the most dangerous bridge in the city today? Now, search engines for the physical world are going to become common by 2028, 10 years from now. This is coming very quickly. And we're going to reach the first billion drones in the world somewhere around 2030 to 2032. And drone taxis are going to become a common form of transportation by 2030. This is going to give rise to mini airports. I just wrote a column on this yesterday. So as a result, we're going to see all these micro industries start cropping up. Drone agriculture scanners, maintenance companies, rescue services, drone taxi services, and much more. Driverless technology. Now, I wrote a column a few months back on 128 things that are going to disappear in the driverless car era. It's quite startling, all the things that change with that. Now, Elon Musk says that he's going to have a car that drives from Los Angeles to New York with no human intervention before the end of this year. He said that last year too, so we'll have to see if it comes true this year. If you've never driven in a driverless car, this is what it's like. So pay close attention to the guy behind the steering wheel, the nervous guy with his hands on his lap. So this brings up a critical point because there's a trust factor that goes along with this. It's going to take a while before we actually trust this technology. As a result, car loans are going to start disappearing. Now, this is going to take a couple decades for this to unfold, but as we can summon a vehicle and it shows up whenever we need it, we no longer have to own our own vehicle. So the car loan industry is going to go downhill. Now, there's lots of changes that come about as a result of this. Because 86% of the cars on the road just have one person in them, very likely we're going to start seeing driverless cars designed for just one person. If you need a two-person one or a five-person one, you can just summon those vehicles, but most of them will just be one person. And as parking lots start to disappear, we're going to start designing buildings with queuing stations in front. Electric cars are going to dominate. The life expectancy of a car is going to be less than a year. As you're picking people up and dropping them off 24 hours, 7 days a week, we start wearing that car out very quick. We could get 1,000 miles on in a single day. That means after 10 months, we've got 300,000 miles on that car. It affects lots of things. 41% of the revenue that comes to airports comes from parking and transportation services. A lot of things start disappearing then. And there's lots of consequences of distracted driving. 38,000 deaths a year, 4.4 million injuries, and we're spending right at $500 billion a year fixing people after car injuries. $500 billion a year. That's $1 out of $6 in the healthcare industry disappears. Nobody's sorry to see that go, but it's a huge impact on society. Lots of money disappears from sales tax. This is going to have a huge effect on cities. Over 10% of retail starts to disappear. New York City brought in $1.9 billion for traffic violations in 2015. All that starts to disappear. There's a whole lot of bad karma in this number, let me tell you. Cities are going to lose over 50% of their revenue streams. So teenagers are going to be some of the early adopters. Parents are actually going to prefer it, but with teenagers, things go wrong. I mean, how can anything go wrong with teenagers? At what age is it okay to put a child in a driverless car by themselves to go to school? If we design a car that recognizes a parent on one end, a teacher on the other end, is it okay to put a 5 or 6-year-old kid in a car by themselves to go to school, and then for how long? Is 10 minutes okay? Is a half hour too long? We've not had any of these discussions yet. This is all new public policy that we'll have to implement. So as the driverless world starts unfolding, this opens the door for lots of mobile businesses. It's interesting, the history of the shopping mall in the United States, the first one was in 2056. The very last shopping mall was built in 2006. We've not built any more since then. E-commerce is going up like a rocket, and department stores are declining. Is this a retail apocalypse? And what comes next? Well, what I see coming next is driverless mobile businesses. We can have fully automated convenience stores that'll come to you. Every softball tournament that sets up, we have mobile convenience stores that come there and set up. Mobile hair shops, mobile dog grooming places, mobile banks. Mobile banks are going to come in lots of different forms. We already have banking deserts in different places of the country. This is kind of a hybrid model that can service large areas. We have mobile bike repair, bike rental places, mobile hair salons and nails and coffee shops, retail stores. These are going to come in lots of different forms. If you could buy a pie from the Prime Minister, would you do that? Mobile vending machines. I like this idea of mobile hotel rooms. You're going to have a big convention. You can just summon another 500 rooms to come in to your city. Or these could actually be hospital rooms too if you have a major accident. The mall of the future I see as a giant warehouse, and every morning mobile businesses come pull in there and set up and do business. A different experience every day. The mobile food truck industry is paving the way for a much more interesting retail experience. The thing that's missing is what I call a geosmart cash register, because nobody knows what the right taxes are at any location in the country. So technology is the great complexity enabler. So if we create this geosmart cash register, it knows exactly where it's at any time and charges the exact amount of money, and then remits micropayments, some blockchain-based payment system that goes out to each of the taxing authorities with every single transaction. Drone taxis are going to be very popular starting very soon. They're already offering service in China. This is what's coming. I don't know about you, but I think I want 2 of them. driverless technology is going to be the most disruptive technology in all history. And there's a number of reasons why that's true. We're going to have driverless delivery services that crop up, mobile retail storefronts, medical services, gaming salons, and much more. Isn't that just an intimidating looking truck coming at you? This is what an intersection will look like in the driverless era. It's kind of the way India looks right now, but. All right, 3D printing, contour crafting. Professor Lee Cronin says that he wants to create very precise pills in the future. So he thinks that we can use 3D printers to print each of our pharmaceutical drugs, but more than that, he thinks that we can take all of the different drugs that we're taking every day and we can print them into a single pill that's hyper-individualized just for us and print it every morning. We can create 3D printed prosthetic hands, 150 prosthetic eyes per hour. I pretty much don't need near that many. We're actually able to print with living tissue, and this is a working the working heart with working blood vessels. They're still not ready for prime time, but we're getting closer. And this is a house that was actually 3D printed in Russia last January. Now, it's only a 400 square foot house. It costs around $10,000. It's not very big, but they did it in less than a day. And it's interesting to see how this comes together. I'm not sure why they did it in Russia. So it's actually a pretty nice little house. This Japanese architect has designed this building, and he wants to 3D print each individual unit and then use a crane to insert them into place. He thinks that's the wave of the future. But this is what people are thinking. People are thinking that we're going to set up around a construction site and be able to 3D print an entire house in one day. But as this technology improves, we're not just printing the structure, we're also printing the wiring in the walls, the plumbing in the walls, the cabinets in the kitchen, the sinks, the toilets, even the insulation, the roofing, and the windows. And so here's the thing. Once you get tired of your house, all you have to do is grind it up and reprint it. You don't even have to clean it first. If your wife or husband gets mad at you, you may come home to an all-new house. We no longer then have the need for flat walls. Every wall becomes an artistic centerpiece. Our architects are going to have a heyday with it, and our very definition of what a house is, what a condo is, what an office is suddenly going to change as we have this new capability. This is a bridge that was printed out of stainless steel in Amsterdam recently. So we're going to have over 10,000 different materials that we can print with by 2025. And this gives rise to 3D printed buildings, clothing, furniture, pharmaceuticals, and much more. As William Gibson says, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. I'll just touch on AI here. We're standing on the brink of a revolution. Lots of things have been brewing for decades, and now they're all coming to an head. So it's going to first show up in healthcare, power, energy, driverless technology, and much more. So some of the headlines in AI are self-taught AI beats doctors at predicting heart attacks. AI is learning what makes you cry at movies. This is important because it also knows what makes you buy things. AI is able to convert images of food into lists of ingredients. Google researchers have developed augmented reality microscope for detecting cancer. No more painful fillings. The dental breakthrough fixes cavities naturally using peptides. China's going to use AI to predict who's going to commit the next crime. Mind-reading AI will be able to scan brains and guess what you're thinking. And Microsoft views the human genome as just another coding language. So if you get sick in the future, rather than giving you drugs, it'll just prescribe an algorithm for you. So Microsoft believes they'll be able to cure cancer and diabetes and a number of key diseases within the next 10 years. So the predictions are AI will enhance humans, will dominate the art world by 2030. By 2030, the largest company on the internet will be an education-based company that we haven't heard of yet. And this opens the door for lots of AI micro-industries. The future is ours to write. Always remember, the future is never a destination, it's always a journey. By 2030, the average person will own printed clothing, live in a printed house, have packages delivered by drones, own more than one robot, work as a freelancer, frequently use driverless cars, and will be able to accomplish 10 times as much as the average person today. So we're entering a period of unprecedented opportunity. So why is this so important? Humanity is going to change more in the next 20 years than in all human history. At the same time, risk factors are going to go up. And our children's children who haven't even been born yet, they're counting on you. They're counting on the people in this room to make great decisions. As Steve Jobs says, right now is one of those moments when you're influencing the future, but sometimes our best efforts just look a lot like this. Pretty much just like that. So I have a new book out that just came out last year. And for more information about the Da Vinci Institute, you can sign up for a free newsletter. And I thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you.
So much fascinating information inside that presentation. And I just want to ask one question that sort of kept occurring to me over and over again. When you've got pills that are being printed and AI curing cancer and driverless cars getting rid of many traffic accidents, what happens to longevity?
Well, it should increase.
But will it?
We don't know. We haven't crossed the 120-year barrier yet. We have a lot of people that are living in Japan, as an example. Over 68,000 people are over 100 years old right now. But we still haven't crossed the 120-year barrier. So once we can actually figure that out, but it's an interesting question. It's the can we, should we question. Do we want to live that long? And will we still have a good quality of life when we live that long?
And how do we pay for all of this?
Great question. So when we start living, if we start living all to 150, 180 years old, all of our current systems start going haywire. Retirement systems, our life insurance, our all of our planning stuff, all of that, we have to throw that out the window and start from scratch, because then we don't know exactly how long people live. The actuarial people are going to scratch their heads and they won't know what to make of it.
Thank you. Fascinating.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you.